The discovery of a little girl's lifeless body in a quiet neighborhood shook the nation. No older than 5, found abandoned and covered in dirt. Her identity was unknown, no one came forward, and the police were left with no clues. But what they uncovered months later was even more shocking. Don't miss the chilling details of this heartbreaking case. Who was the child? What happened to her? Because this story will haunt you. The discovery of the tragedy. On the morning of March 18, 2017, in the quiet and somewhat overlooked neighborhood of Colonia El Sol, situated in Ecatepec, a quiet town in the state of Mexico, in a vacant lot, a little girl's body was found, and there was no immediate clue as to who she was, where she had come from, or how she had ended up there. The child was discovered by a few concerned residents who immediately contacted the authorities. What they found was heart-wrenching. Her body was covered in dirt, her face barely visible beneath a heavy layer of grime. Signs of physical distress were immediately evident, marks on her body, signs of trauma that hinted at something deeply wrong. And investigators began their work. It was clear from the outset that this was no ordinary case. No one in the area recognized the child, and there was no missing person report that matched her description. Who was this little girl? And why had no one reported her missing? Initial investigations and autopsy results. The girl was quickly taken to the morgue for a forensic examination. What they found was disturbing. The child's body bore clear signs of physical abuse, bruises around her eyes and torso, bite marks, and severe injuries in sensitive areas, which the autopsy determined was the primary cause of death. Internal bleeding had contributed to her death as well, indicating a brutal and violent end. Despite efforts to identify her using fingerprints, no matches came up in the database. There were no reports of missing children that aligned with her description. For several days, the authorities continued their search, contacting nearby migrant communities, yet no clear answers came. The tragedy deepened with the realization that the little girl's identity remained a mystery. The media soon began covering the story, and the child was given the name Angelita in honor of her innocence. This case caught the attention of people across the country, not only because of the cruelty that had been inflicted on this innocent child, but because of the haunting question of who she was and why no one had noticed she was missing. The role of Veronica V. Elbazo and the search for identity, better known by her social media alias Frida Guerrera. From the moment the story hit the news, Frida made it her mission to uncover the identity of the little girl and demand justice for her. Through her social media platforms, Frida launched a campaign to raise awareness about the case. She collaborated with a forensic artist to create a composite sketch of the girl based on the details that had been gathered from the community. People across the country began sharing it on social media, hoping for a breakthrough. In November 2017, after months of searching, a woman named Marina Compton Medina reached out to Frida, believing that the girl in the composite sketch could be her niece. This was the first significant lead in the case, and it gave the investigators and Frida renewed hope. Frida promptly passed this information on to the authorities, but there were no immediate answers. Marina didn't have any recent photos of the girl to compare with the sketch, but the hope of finding an answer continued to grow. On December 14th, Frida received a breakthrough message from a man named Lo, who sent her a photograph of a young girl. He claimed to have known both the child and her mother. Identification of Guadalupe Medina. The photo provided by Lo proved to be crucial in identifying the girl as Guadalupe Medina, affectionately known as Lupita. She was 4 years old at the time of her death. The search for the truth about her identity had finally borne fruit, but the next challenge was to uncover what had happened to her and who was responsible for the cruelty that led to her death. As investigators delved into Lupita's past, they uncovered a dark and troubling history involving her family. Lupita's mother, Yadira Medina, was a woman who had faced many personal struggles, including a history of abuse, neglect, and substance use. Yadira's difficult life had been marked by violence, instability, and criminal behavior. In December 2017, authorities arrested Yadira Medina and her partner, Pablo Rodriguez, who was also involved in criminal activities. Both were charged with the tragic death of Lupita. DNA tests confirmed that Yadira was indeed Lupita's biological mother. The tragic background of Lupita's life. Lupita's life had been marked by neglect from an early age. She was born on January 16, 2013, but her birth had never been officially registered, leaving her without any medical history or formal documentation. Instead, she had a history of abandoning her children, often leaving them in the care of strangers or neglecting them altogether. Yadira's past was filled with hardship. She had been expelled from school at the age of 7 for a variety of behavioral issues, including getting her classmates drunk and attacking the teacher. Her difficult relationship with her family, particularly her mother, led to even more pain in her childhood, as Yadira herself had been sexually abused by a relative. When she confided in her mother, instead of receiving support and protection, she was met with violence. This mistreatment pushed Yadira to run away from home and eventually turn to drugs and criminal behavior to cope with her trauma. By the time Lupita was born, Yadira had already developed a dependency on crack cocaine, which affected her ability to care for her child. Lupita spent her early months in the care of a man who worked as a garbage collector. Yadira reclaimed her daughter. Despite her promises to do better, Yadira's chaotic lifestyle continued, and Lupita was subjected to neglect and mistreatment. The final moments and death of Lupita. March 17, 2017. Lupita had accidentally wet the bed, and when Yadira discovered this, she became enraged. Yadira allegedly punished Lupita, scolding her for not informing her that she needed to use the bathroom. Lupita's cries for help triggered an outburst of violence, which involved both Yadira and her partner, Pablo. It is believed that Pablo joined in the assault after being woken up by the sound of Lupita's screams. The exact sequence of events remains unclear, but what is known is that Lupita's cries for help led to a brutal escalation. The violence continued, and Lupita, a child who had already experienced so much suffering, was finally silenced. When her parents realized she had died, they wrapped her body in a blanket and, in an effort to cover their tracks, dumped her body in the vacant lot. The tragic case of Lupita Medina has left an indelible mark on everyone who followed her story. Justice was served, but it's impossible to forget the horror she endured. Stay tuned for our next true crime documentary, where we uncover the heartbreaking story of Ella Catley Crawford, bullied to death in a world that failed her. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest investigations. Together, we seek the truth in every story, and we won't stop until justice is served. See you next time.